I'm Annette Archer, 67, and I spent 41 years as an ICU nurse. So when my son threw a housewarming party and I asked what time I should come, I was ready to be useful. Mom. He said the guest list is curated. It's for professionals. I'm a retired nurse. I also gave him the $60,000 he used as a down payment. The loan he had by then conveniently forgotten. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. And here's the part I want you to understand before we go any further. I didn't crash that party. I did something worse. 3 weeks later, I simply walked into the one room my son would have given anything to own. And I didn't have to say a single unkind word. The most important man in that room said it all for me. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories, where the quietest woman in the room has usually earned the right to be the loudest. Stay with me to the end of this one. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Let me tell you what 41 years in an intensive care unit does to a person. It makes you calm, not cold. Calm. When a monitor screams at 3 o'clock in the morning and a man's heart is quitting under your hands, you do not get to panic. You get to be the steadiest thing in the room. I restarted hearts that had stopped. I sat with people through the last hour of their lives and held a hand so they wouldn't go out alone. I have been thrown up on, bled on, and thanked by families who couldn't remember my name an hour later. And I would do every shift again. My husband, Walt, used to wait up for me after nights. He passed 4 years ago. He was the only one who ever really understood that the job wasn't a job. It was a calling I happened to get paid badly for. I keep one thing from all of it. A small enamel pin, my 41-year service pin, given to me at my retirement in a sheet cake ceremony in a hospital break room. It sits in a dish by my door. So when my son told me a cocktail party had a bar too high for me to clear, I'll be honest, I almost laughed. I have coached terrified interns through their first code. I've told a surgeon respectfully that he was wrong and been right. A seating chart does not frighten me. But I didn't laugh because it wasn't the party that hurt. It was who I'd raised and what he decided I was. Let me back up. You should know how we got here. My son Grant is 38 and he has spent his whole life running in one direction away from where he came from. We weren't poor, but we were tired. I worked nights and doubles. His father drove a delivery route. There were a lot of dinners I missed. A lot of school plays I caught the second half of still smelling like the unit. Grant noticed. Children always notice. But where another kid might have grown up proud of a mother who saved lives, Grant grew up quietly embarrassed by a mother who came home exhausted in scrubs. He became a wealth manager. He's good at it. I'll give him that. He learned the clothes, the watch. The way of talking that makes money feel comfortable around you. Somewhere in there, he decided that the people who matter are the people in suits and the people who don't are the people who clean up after them. Nursing's noble mom, he told me once in the voice you'd use about a charity. It's just not, a career. I'd held a 16-year-old's organs in place with my 2 gloved hands while we waited for the surgeon to scrub in. That child graduated college last year. I went to the ceremony. Her mother still sends me a card every Christmas. A career. I let it go. You learn raising a Said to let a great many things go. What I didn't know yet was how far he'd gone. The housewarming was about to show me. But first, you need to know about the $60,000, because that's the part he forgot and the part that mattered most. 2 years ago, Grant and his wife Sloan found the house, a glass and stone thing in a development where the lawns look ironed. Far more house than 2 people need. Exactly the address Grant had been chasing his whole life. They were close on the financing, but short on the down payment. And Grant, who does not like to ask for anything, finally asked me. I had it. 41 years of overtime and a paid-off little house leaves you with more than people assume. I gave him $60,000, but I'm a nurse. We document everything, a medication, a dosage at a time, a signature. You write it down or it didn't happen. And someday it protects a life. So I didn't hand my son a duffel bag of cash and a wink. I had a simple promissory note drawn up. $60,000, a gentle interest, a repayment schedule he could meet in his sleep. He signed it at my kitchen table. I put it in a blue folder in my filing cabinet next to Walt's death certificate and my pension papers. To my heart, it was a gift. I never expected to chase him for a dime. But the paper was real because love and paperwork are not enemies. Whatever the movies tell you, the best nurses know that the kindest thing you can do is also keep a clean record. Grant thanked me that day. He hugged me. He meant it. And then over 2 years, the way a man does when he badly needs a story about himself, he simply forgot. The $60,000 became savings. The savings became, I did this myself. By the time the house was real, so was the lie. Sloan helped the story along. She's good at stories. My daughter-in-law is an interior stylist, which means she is paid to make rooms look like no one ever struggled in them. She does the same thing to people. Within a year of marrying Grant, the photos on their walls had quietly rearranged themselves. The picture of Grant in his cheap fur suit beaming next to me in my scrubs at his college graduation came down. In its place went black and white prints of a couple who looked like they had been born at a wine tasting. I wasn't in the news story, or I was, but as a supporting character with no lines. Grant's mom, she was a nurse or something. Very sweet. I want to be fair to Sloan. She isn't cruel for sport. She is terrified the way Grant is terrified that the wrong person will look too closely and see the seams. Two people who married each other's ambition and then got scared of anyone who remembered the version before. I understood it. I even forgave it mostly. A mother's forgiveness is a renewable resource. We make more overnight. But forgiveness isn't the same as playing along. And I was about to be asked to play along with something I couldn't because the house was finished now. Decorated, photographed, perfect. And Grant and Sloan were going to celebrate it with the people who mattered. A curated guest list of professionals. I didn't know yet that I wouldn't be on it. I was still God help me planning what to bring. I heard about the party from a cousin, actually, before I heard about it from my own son. That should have told me something. I chose not to hear it. Big housewarming at Grant's, my cousin Diane mentioned on the phone. Sloan's been planning it for weeks. Caterers, the whole thing. Oh, how nice, I said. And I meant it. And a small, warm part of me lit up the way it does when your child throws open the doors of a life you helped build. I started thinking about what to bring. Not money, not anything that would embarrass him. I went to the garden center on a Saturday and I picked out a peace lily. A good big one. Glossy leaves, one white bloom just opening. They're nearly impossible to kill peace lies, which is exactly why I love them. They forgive neglect. They clean the very air in a room. I thought it would look handsome on his new stone mantle. I bought a card. I wrote, "So proud of you. Love, Mom." I set the lily on my kitchen counter where I'd see it, and I waited for the call telling me when to come. I want you to sit with that image for a second because I've thought about it 100 times since. A 67-year-old woman who'd given her son $60,000 and 41 years of example standing in her kitchen watering a plant waiting to be told she was welcome in the house she'd helped pay for. The call came 2 days later. It did not go the way I'd pictured. "Hi, sweetheart," I said when I saw his name. "I've been hoping you'd call. I've got a little something for the new place. When should I come Saturday?" There was a pause. I know. Pauses. In my line of work, a pause is where the bad news lives. "So, about Saturday," Grant said. It's kind of a work thing, Mom. Sloan and I were trying to be strategic. There are people coming who could really move the needle for the firm. Clients, a couple of partners." Another pause. "The guest list is curated. It's for professionals." You understand the guest list is curated. It's for professionals. I stood in my kitchen next to the peace lily with the one open bloom, and I felt something go very still inside me. Not loud still. The way the unit goes still right before you realize the rhythm on the monitor isn't coming back. "I see," I said. My voice was perfectly steady. 41 years buys you that at least. Of course I wouldn't want to be in the way of business. "It's not that you'd be in the way," he said too quickly. It's a certain crowd. You'd be more comfortable not having to make small talk with a bunch of finance people." "You're probably right," I said. "Have a wonderful time, honey. The house sounds beautiful." I hung up. I looked at the lily. I looked at the card that said, "So proud of you." And I did not cry. I want that on the record. I have watched braver things than my own son than this. But I will tell you, I sat down at my table for a long while. Here's what I kept coming back to sitting at that table. It wasn't the party. I have skipped 1,000 parties. A nurse's life is mostly the parties you miss. It was the word professionals, as though 41 years of keeping strangers alive had been a hobby, as though the steadiest, most necessary work I'd ever seen a human being do. The work I'd given my one life to. Didn't clear the bar for cocktails on my own son's new patio. He didn't say, "I'm worried you'll feel out of place." He said the guest list was for professionals. And then he placed me gently on the other side of that line. I carried the peace lily out to my own front porch and set it on the rail where I'd see it every morning with my coffee. If it wasn't going to grace his mantle, it could keep me company. Well, I'd told it, it's just you and me then. I'm not too proud to admit I felt small that night, smaller than I'd felt in years. But here is a thing 4 decades at the edge of life will teach you. Feelings are information, not instructions. You feel the fear, and then you read the monitor, and then you do the next right thing. I didn't know yet what the next right thing was. I only knew I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table I'd already paid for. The party came and went. I know it was lovely. Sloan posted 40 photographs of it. I made myself look once the way you press a bruise to see if it's still there. Grant in a beautiful jacket, laughing with men who look like him. Sloan in cream silk. The stone mantle I'd imagined my lily on holding, instead, a tasteful arrangement of dried branches that cost more than the lily and did less. Caption, grateful for the people who got us here. Tagged 11 of them. Not one of them me. I closed the app and I sat with what professional had actually cost me over the years. It cost me Grant's 8th birthday. I was holding pressure on a gunshot wound while his father lit the candles. It cost me 100 Thanksgivings I worked so the nurses with young children could be home. It cost me my own back, my own feet, my own sleep schedule for 4 decades. It bought in exchange a long line of strangers who got to go home to their families because I didn't go home to mine. That is what the word professional means to me. It is the least amateur thing a person can possibly do. To stand between someone you've never met and the worst day of their life and not flinch. My son had used that word as a velvet rope, and he'd put me on the outside of it. I wasn't angry yet. Anger is loud, and I was still in the still part, but the stillness was starting to organize itself into something. I just needed one more piece of information before I knew what. It arrived as these things do by accident. A week after the party, Sloan texted me. I think it was meant to be kind, which somehow made it worse. Hi, Annette. Hope you're well. We missed you Saturday, but honestly, you'd have been bored. It was all work people. Very shop talk. Let's do a quiet family dinner soon. Just us. You'd have been bored. As if I were a child who couldn't follow grown-up conversation. As if I hadn't sat on hospital ethics boards, hadn't testified in a malpractice case, hadn't explained brain death to a sobbing family at 2 a.m, in words they could bear to hear. I didn't answer it right away. While I was deciding how, Grant called about something else and said the quiet part without meaning to. "Mom, don't make it a thing, okay?" he said when I mentioned lightly that I'd heard the party was nice. "You'd have been out of place. These are heavy hitters. I'm trying to build something here. You'd have been out of place." There it was again in a slightly different key. Out of place in my son's life bought in part with my money. Built and whole on the example of a woman who taught him what showing up for people actually looks like. "I'd never want to be out of place, Grant," I said mildly. "Tell me how's the firm? Anything exciting?" And that my small, mild mother's question, the kind he'd answered absently 1,000 times, is how I learned the one fact that changed everything. Because Grant, flattered to be asked, started to brag. And in the bragging, he said a name. "Honestly, things are huge right now," Grant said. "Warming up. I'm about to land the biggest client of my career. If I close this, I make partner. We're talking a complete game sure. That's wonderful, honey." I said, "Who is it if you can say you wouldn't know him?" he said. And I want you to hear how casually my son said that to the woman who knew half the doctors in 3 counties. He's a huge deal in medicine, cardiac surgeon, runs a whole institute. Elliot Vance. I was very glad we were on the phone so he couldn't see my face. He's loaded. He's connected and he's finally taking meetings. Grant went on. I've been working him for months. There's a charity gala coming up where I'll get my shot. Mom, this is the one. Everything I've built has been for a moment like this. Everything I've built. While I held the receiver and a memory I hadn't touched in 20 years rose up off the bottom of me like a body coming up for air, and the house, he added on a roll now. Honestly, between the house and making partner, I'll have done it all by 40. Self-made from nothing, a little laugh. Dad would have gotten a kick out of it. Self-made from nothing. I didn't correct him. I didn't say, you mean the house with my $60,000 in the foundation? I didn't say anything about the blue folder in my filing cabinet or about the promissory note with his signature on it sitting 2 in from his father's death certificate. I said, I'm proud of you, sweetheart. And I was already walking toward the cabinet. Elliot Vance. I sat down on the edge of my bed with the phone still warm in my hand, and I let the name finish arriving. There are patients you forget. There have to be. The mind protects itself. And then there are the ones who live in you forever in a little lit room you can walk into anytime you're brave enough. Katie Vance was one of those. Let me tell you about a night 20 years ago, and then you'll understand the rest of this story because everything that happened at that gala happened first on a Tuesday in 2006 on my unit at 4 a.m. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and a good story like a good chart goes in order. What matters right now is this. My son had spent months chasing the single most important client of his life, a man he was certain his nurse mother wouldn't know. And I had 2 decades earlier spent 11 hours keeping that man's 8-year-old daughter alive. I didn't feel triumphant. That surprised me. What I felt sitting on the edge of my bed was something quieter and much older. The feeling of a circle you didn't know you were standing in, beginning very slowly to close. I got up. I went to the filing cabinet. I opened the bottom drawer. I took out the blue folder. I need you to understand that I wasn't scheming. I want to be honest about that because it would be a cleaner story if I'd hatched a plan that night. Rubbing my hands. I didn't. I opened the blue folder because I suddenly badly needed to hold proof that the last few weeks were real, that I hadn't imagined my own worth. When the people who are supposed to know you best decide you're nothing, you go looking for the records. A nurse trusts the records. So I sat at my kitchen table under the same light where Grant had signed that note. And I laid the folder's contents out one piece at a time, the way I used to lay out a patient's history before rounds. The promissory note, $60,000. His signature confident, the same signature he now used on contracts to feel important. The bank record of the transfer, the date. The amount clean as a vital sign. And underneath, because I'd tucked it there years ago and forgotten an older piece of paper, a photograph. It stopped me cold. The photo was from a hospital fundraiser years back. In it, a much younger me in scrubs crouches next to a small girl in a wheelchair. The girl is grinning a gap-toothed grin and holding up a crayon drawing of a nurse with a yellow sun over her head. On the back, in a child's careful pencil, to Nurse Annette. You fixed my heart. Love, Katie V. Katie Vance, 8 years old. A drunk driver had crossed the center line and folded the family car around her like paper. Her father, a young surgeon then, had been at a conference 3 states away and couldn't get a flight until morning. So, for 11 hours through 2, crashes, the heart kind, not the car kind, it was me and the team and an 8-year-old stubborn, magnificent will to live. When Elliot Vance finally made it to that unit at dawn, gray-faced, still in yesterday's clothes, I was the one who walked him to her bed. I was the one who told him she'd turned the corner an hour before. He gripped both my hands so hard it hurt, and he wept. This grown surgeon, and he said, I will never forget your name. People say that they mean it in the moment, and life carries the moment off. I never expected him to remember. I'd have forgotten it myself, filed it in the lit little room with the others. But there was the photograph in my hands on the same night my son had told me Elliot Vance was the great prize his nurse mother wouldn't know. I sat very still for a long time. I wasn't going to crash my son's party. That was never who I was. But I was, it seemed, going to be invited to a gala. And I was beginning to understand that the kindest, most devastating thing I could do was simply to go and let the room see exactly who I was. The universe, it turns out, was already 2 steps ahead of me. The next morning, my oldest friend called. Ruthie and I trained together in the 80s. She sat on the board of the hospital foundation, now the same foundation that ran the big spring gala every year to raise money for the cardiac unit. The unit where once we'd kept a little girl alive. Annette, she said, and I could hear her smiling. I've been trying to get this past the committee for 3 years and they finally listened. We want to honor you. The Lifetime in Nursing Award at the gala next month. 41 years, honey. It's time somebody would put your name on a wall. I sat down. Ruthie, I said I don't know. What's to know? How do I explain it? A month earlier, I'd have said yes with my whole heart. But I'd just been told by my own son that I wasn't a professional. Something in me had flinched so hard I wasn't sure I could stand at a podium and let a room look at me without seeing what Grant saw. An old woman who used to be a nurse. Out of place. It's a lot of fuss for an old lady. I said, it's not fuss, it's 41 years. Ruthie said, you held this whole unit together. You're going to stand up and take this and you're going to let people say thank you. When's the last time you let anyone say thank you? I didn't answer that. We both knew the answer was never. Let me think about it, I said. But I'd already half stopped breathing because Ruthie had just told me the date and the venue of the gala. And I knew with a strange calm exactly whose great career moment was scheduled for the very same night. If you've ever been the person who does the quiet, necessary work, the nurse, the caregiver, the one who shows up and cleans up and asks for nothing, then you know the particular ache of being unseen. You don't do it for thanks. But God, it lands different when someone you love decides your whole life doesn't count. If this is hitting close, stay with me. I promise. This story is going somewhere you'll want to be. I spent 2 days almost saying no to Ruthie. Isn't that something a woman gets offered for the first time in her life, a public thank you for 4 decades of devotion? And her first instinct is to decline it, to spare everyone the trouble of looking at her. That is what years of being told your background does to a person. You start to believe the lighting was correct. And then I thought about the peace lily on my porch. I thought about the word professional used like a door. I thought about a little girl's crayon drawing and a young father's hands gripping mine. And I thought, when did I agree to disappear? I never had. I'd just gotten quiet, and quiet had been mistaken for gone. I called Ruthie back. I'll accept, I said, on one condition. No big speeches about me beforehand. Let me just be there. Let the evening be the evening. Deal, she said, delighted. Oh, Annette, it's going to be wonderful. Half the medical community will be there, even some of the money people. The foundation lined up some fancy sponsor this year, a wealth firm to underwrite the whole thing. I closed my eyes. Is that right, I said. Which firm? She told me. It was Grant's. So here's what I knew. Sitting in my kitchen with the phone going quiet in my hand. On a Saturday night next month in one ballroom, 3 rivers were going to meet. My son would be there in his best jacket, working the most important night of his career. Trying to close Elliott Vance and make partner sponsoring with his firm's money an evening he had no idea was about anything but business. Elliott Vance would be there, the great prize, the cardiac surgeon, who 20 years ago had promised never to forget the name of the nurse who saved his daughter. And I would be there, Annette Archer, the night's Honori. The woman my son had decided wasn't professional enough to stand on his patio. None of it was a trap I'd built. I want to keep saying that because it matters to me that you understand the kind of woman I am. I didn't engineer a single piece of it. I lent my son money and kept the paper. I saved a child and kept the photo. I gave 41 years and someone finally wanted to say thank you. 3 honest things I'd done across 2 decades were simply about to arrive in the same room on the same night. All I had to do was show up as myself. That was the something worse than crashing. I wasn't going to burst through his door uninvited. I was going to walk through a door I'd been invited through. The front door of the exact room he'd spent his life trying to get into, and let him watch the people he worshipped find out who I was to them. I took out my navy dress. I found the little enamel pin and I waited for Saturday. I want to be careful here because I don't want you to think this became about revenge. It didn't. Not the way the word usually means. I made myself a promise in the days before the gala. I would not say one cruel word to my son. I would not announce the $60,000 to the room like a woman settling a score. I wouldn't need to. The whole point, the thing that made it land, was that I would do nothing at all except stop hiding. For years, I'd helped them keep the story tidy. I'd stayed off the guest lists out of the photos on the far side of the velvet rope so my son could feel self-made. I'd been a good sport about my own eraser. I was just going to stop. That's it. That was the entire plan. Show up where I was wanted. Wearing my own life and let the truth do what truth does in a room full of people who can finally see it. You're not crashing anything, Ruthie said when I told her my son's firm was the sponsor and that we'd, had a little distance lately. You're the guest of honor, Annette. He's the help, technically. His firm bought the napkins. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Don't say that. I'll say it twice. But underneath the laugh, I felt the old steadiness settle over me. The 4 a.m. calm. I checked my supplies the way I always had before a hard shift. The dress, the pen, the blue folder which I decided to bring not to brandish, just to have the way you keep a crash cart nearby. You hope you won't need it. You'd be a fool not to have it. Grant called twice that month, and both times he was so full of his own big night that he never once asked about mine. It's all coming together, he said. Vance confirmed he's attending. My firm's the headline sponsor, so I'll have access all night. Sloan found me a new jacket. Mom, if I close him at this thing, everything changes. I'm sure it'll be a night to remember, I said, and meant it more than he could know. You doing okay? Need anything? He asked, and for a second my heart lifted because it sounded like he might ask where I'd be that Saturday, like the worlds might touch on their own. I'm wonderful, I said. I actually have plans that night myself. Oh, good, he said, already moving on. Not hearing it the way he hadn't heard most things about me in years. Bingo or something. Good for you, Mom. Bingo or something. I held the phone and I looked out at the peace lily on the porch rail which had put out a second bloom, and I felt no urge to correct him. Let him keep the small picture of me he found comfortable. The big one would arrive on its own schedule. Something like that. I said, knock him dead, honey. I mean it. Love you, Mom. Gotta run. He ran. He was always running. My boy toward a room he thought would finally make him real. He had no idea the woman who'd made him real in the first place would be standing at the front of it with her name on a plaque when he got there. Sloan called once too ostensibly to check in. Really to manage me. We should do that family dinner soon, she said. Things have just been so crazy with Grant's work. You understand, it's a really important time for us. We have to be really intentional about who we spend energy on right now. Who we spend energy on. I had become, to my daughter-in-law, a line item under expenses. I understand completely. I said, you focus on your big night. I'll focus on mine. Same. Mena your night. A flicker of confusion, then the easy dismissal. Oh, that's sweet. Well, we'll catch up after. She didn't ask. It genuinely did not occur to her that an old nurse could have a night worth a capital N. After I hung up, I did one practical thing because I am practical. I called the lawyer who'd drawn up the promissory note and asked him plainly whether it was still good, whether if I ever needed to, I could call the loan. It's airtight, Annette, he said. Signed, dated, witnessed with a schedule he's quietly ignored. You've been more than patient. You could demand the balance tomorrow. I'm not going to demand it tomorrow, I said. Then why'd you call? I thought about it. Because I spent 40 years being the person who knew where the records were when everyone else was panicking. I said, I just wanted to know the cart was stocked. He chuckled. It's stocked. I didn't intend to use the note as a weapon. Truly, the truth of who I was would be plenty, but a nurse keeps the cart stocked. You never raise your voice when you know exactly where everything is. The day of the gala, I got ready the way I used to get ready for a shift I knew would be hard. Slowly. Deliberately, nothing forgotten. I pressed the navy dress. I did my hair myself the way Walt liked it. And then I stood at my dresser and looked at the little enamel pin in its dish for a long time before I picked it up. 41 years. A whole working life fired down into a half-inch of enamel. I'd never worn it out anywhere. It felt boastful somehow, like a soldier wearing medals to the grocery store. But that night, I pinned it to my navy dress right over my heart. And I looked at myself in the mirror. A 67-year-old woman who'd been told 3 weeks earlier that she wasn't a professional, wearing the only proof I'd ever needed and had never thought to show. "There you are," I said to the mirror. It had been a while since I'd seen her. I picked up my purse. Inside it, the blue folder folded once just in case, not to use to have. Before I left, I stepped onto the porch and touched one of the lilies' white blooms with a finger. "Wish me luck," I told it. I'm going to a party I'm actually invited to. Then I drove to the nicest hotel in the city where my son was at that very moment, straightening his new jacket in a ballroom mirror, rehearsing the pitch of his life with no idea that the foundation of everything he was about to say, self-made from nothing, was about to walk in wearing navy, with a plaque waiting at the front of the room with her name on it. I have to back up one day because there's a phone call I skipped and it matters. The night before the gala, Grant called me, and his voice was different. Tighter. The voice underneath the voice. "Mom, weird question," he said. "Any chance you've got some liquidity right now?" "Just short term." "Things are stretched. The house, the renovation, Sloan's business had a slow quarter. If I can just get through this month until the Vance thing closes." My striving son, who'd told a room he was self-made from nothing, was quietly underwater. The glass house had a mortgage the size of a mountain, and the lifestyle that proved he'd arrived was eating him alive. "How much are we talking?" I asked gently. "I don't know, 40. It'd just be a bridge." 40,000 on top of the 60 he'd already forgotten. "Grant," I said. "I love you, but no." A silence then, defensive the old reflex. "Wow. Okay, I figured a retired nurse your expenses are basically nothing. I just thought you thought a retired nurse would have it and wouldn't matter enough to say no," I said without heat. "It's all right. I understand, but the answer is no." "You'd be out of place giving me a hard time about this," he said, which didn't even make sense except that it was the third time he'd reached for that word out of place, like a man who only had the one tool. "Get some sleep, honey," I said. "Big night tomorrow." He hung up angry. I slept fine. I knew by then exactly where everything was. I'll be honest with you about my heart because by now you might think I'd turned to stone. I hadn't. That last night lying awake, I grieved not for myself, for the boy he'd been before he decided that where he came from was something to scrub off. I remembered a 5-year-old Grant pressing a Band-Aid onto my knuckle after a long shift, very serious, telling me, "Now you're fixed, Mama, like you fix people." He'd wanted to be like me once. Somewhere along the way, the world taught him that being like me was small. I'll always wonder how much of that the world did and how much I let it. But grief and clarity can share a bed. I knew what tomorrow was, and I knew I wasn't going to flinch. If you've spent your life as the one who quietly holds things together, hear me. You are allowed to be seen. You are allowed to take the thank you. Letting people witness your worth is not vanity. Sometimes it's the only language left that the people who forgot you will actually understand. I wasn't going to the gala to humiliate my son. I was going to stop protecting him from the truth. There's a difference, and it's the whole difference. I'd lent him money and kept the paper. I'd saved a child and kept the photo. I'd given my life and finally said yes to the thank you. 3 honest acts walking into one room. I turned off the light. Tomorrow, the velvet rope my son had put between us was going to be on the other side of him, and he was going to find out in front of everyone he wanted to impress which side of it his mother had been standing on all along. Saturday came up clear and warm. I did the small, ordinary thing slowly, the way you do on a day you know you'll remember. I had my coffee on the porch. The peace lily, the one that was supposed to live on my son's stone mantle, had opened a 3rd bloom overnight. 3 white flags of it, now bright against the green, thriving on the neglect of being left somewhere it wasn't wanted. "Look at you," I said, better off out here in the air. I thought about that sipping my coffee. The lily had been turned away from the fine house and had simply gone on blooming, cleaning the air of whatever porch would have it. There was a sermon in there, but I've never liked sermons, so I let it be a plant. I dressed in the late afternoon navy, the pin over my heart, Walt's small gold watch. I tucked the blue folder into my purse and didn't think about it again. In the car before I started the engine, I sat for a moment and did the thing I used to do in the parking lot before a shift I dreaded. One breath all the way in, one breath all the way out. Steady the hands. Read the room when you get there. Do the next right thing. Then I drove to the hotel valet my 11-year-old sedan between a Tesla and a Mercedes and walked in the front door of my son's biggest night. Invited, expected, and entirely myself. The ballroom was exactly the kind of room Grant had spent his life trying to belong to. Chandeliers, a string quartet, 200 people who all seemed to know they mattered. I saw him before he saw me. My son across the room in the new jacket, glowing, working a small cluster of guests with that easy, hungry charm. I knew the posture. It was the posture of a man telling people he was self-made. I didn't go to him. I found my table near the front where the honorees sit, and I let Ruthie squeeze my hand and introduce me around. This is Annette Archer. She kept saying 41 years in the ICU. We're honoring her tonight. And doctor after doctor, nurse after nurse took my hand in both of theirs. Several of them knew my name. 2 of them had trained under me. One, a chief of cardiology, now had been a terrified intern. I'd talked through his first code at 26. Annette Archer, he said, his eyes going bright. My God, you're the reason I didn't quit that first year. I was it, turned out surrounded by people to whom I was not out of place. I was the room. Across the ballroom, Grant spotted me. I watched it happen. The double take, the confusion, the small frown of a man seeing a familiar face in a context that doesn't compute. He excused himself from his cluster and started toward me, weaving through the tables. His expression caught somewhere between, "What are you doing here?" and a host's reflex to smooth a problem. He didn't make it to me before the lights dimmed and a voice came over the speakers asking everyone to find their seats. The program was beginning. He had to turn back. He had no idea what was coming. The foundation's president spoke first, then the head of the Cardiac Institute. There was applause, a video, the usual gala rhythm. Grant, 2 tables away, kept glancing at me, trying to catch my eye, mouthing something. "Later, we'll talk later." I gave him a small, calm nod and turned my attention to the stage. Then Ruthie stood up to present the Lifetime in Nursing Award. Every so often, she began, "We honor someone whose career wasn't about a single dramatic moment, but about 41 years of moments. Most of them at 3 in the morning, most of them unwitnessed. Tonight's recipient has held this hospital together for 4 decades. She has trained half the nurses in this room. She has sat with the dying and restarted the living." Ruthie's voice caught. She taught me what this job actually is. Please join me in honoring my friend, the finest nurse I have ever known, Annette Archer. The room rose. 200 people, surgeons, cardiologists, nurses, the chief of medicine, the people my son worshipped from a distance stood up and turned toward our table and put their hands together for me. I stood in my navy dress, the little enamel pin over my heart catching the light. And I let them, for once in my life, I let them say thank you. And across the ballroom, frozen, half out of his chair, his hands not moving his face, the color of the tablecloth, was my son watching the entire room he'd spent his life trying to impress get to its feet. For the mother he'd told 3 weeks earlier that she wasn't professional enough to attend a cocktail party. He looked like a man who had just heard a monitor flatline. I walked to the stage. I took the small, heavy plaque from Ruthie and hugged her. I stepped to the microphone and looked out at all those standing people, and I was about to say my few quiet words. And that's when a man near the center of the room, tall, silver-haired, in a beautiful suit, did not sit down when the others did. He stayed standing, and in the settling quiet before I could speak, he said loud enough to carry Annette Archer 200 heads turned to him. It was Elliot Vance, 20 years older, but the same eyes. The great client the prize my son had chased for months. "Forgive me," he said to the room, his voice not quite steady. I have to say this out loud because I've waited 20 years to say it to a room instead of just to her. He looked at me. 20 years ago, my 8-year-old daughter was hit by a drunk driver. I was 3 states away and couldn't get home. For 11 hours, this woman kept my Katie alive. Her heart stopped twice. Annette Archer brought her back twice. His voice broke. Katie is a pediatric surgeon now. She has a daughter of her own. Every good thing in my life downstream of that night exists because of the nurse standing on that stage. The room, already standing, broke into something louder than applause. I found my son's face in the crowd. Grant was staring at Elliot Vance, the man he'd been trying to become worthy of the deal that would make him self-made. As Vance wept openly with gratitude toward the mother Grant had been ashamed of, I watched my son understand in real time that the most important person in his professional universe loved and revered the exact woman he'd left off a guest list for being just a nurse. I hadn't said a word yet. I didn't need to. When the room finally quieted, I leaned to the microphone. I kept my voice even. The 400 AM voice. The one that steadies a room instead of stirring it. "Thank you," I said. "I didn't expect that, Elliot. Katie drew me a picture that night between the bad hours. A nurse with a son over her head. I still have it." He pressed his hand to his mouth and nodded. "People have been calling me a professional all evening," I went on. "And I'll admit 3 weeks ago I'd started to wonder if I still counted as one." A few polite laughs. My son was not laughing. So let me tell you what I think the word means. I spent 41 years with professionals. I held their hands while they died. I caught them when their own bodies betrayed them. I learned their children's names. A professional to me is simply someone who shows up for other people on the worst day of their lives and doesn't flinch. I let that sit. I did not look at Grant. I didn't have to. The whole room could feel where the words were going. You don't get to be a professional because of the building you work in, or the watch you wear, or the address on your house. I said, you earn it at 3 o'clock in the morning when no one's watching, doing the unglamorous thing because it's right. That's the only guest list that's ever mattered to me. The applause came warm and long, and in the middle of it, I finally let my eyes find my son's. I didn't glare. I just looked at him, the way you look at someone you love who has hurt you and isn't going to be able to pretend otherwise ever again. He looked away first. I came down off the stage into a small crowd of people who wanted to hold my hand. Elliot Vance was first. "I tried to find you over the years," he said, gripping my hands the same way he had 2 decades before. "The hospital wouldn't give out a home number. Katie will lose her mind when I tell her." He shook his head. "What are you doing at this gala? Are you connected to the foundation?" And before I could answer, Grant was there. Of course he was. The deal was right in front of him. He couldn't help himself, even now. Dr. Vance. "Hi, Grant Archer. My firm's the sponsor tonight. We actually have a meeting on the calendar." He was talking fast, trying to staple himself to the moment, then, with a stiff, awful brightness, gesturing at me. "And this is actually my mother." The silence that followed was its own kind of verdict. Elliot Vance looked at Grant. He looked at me with my plaque and my pin. He looked back at Grant, and you could see the math finishing behind his eyes. The sponsor, the eager young man who'd been chasing him for months, was the son of the nurse who'd saved his daughter. And that son had introduced his mother last as an afterthought in a room that had just risen to its feet for her. "Your mother," Vance said slowly, "is Annette Archer." "Yes, sir," Grant said. Yeah, small world, right. Small world," Vance repeated, and the warmth had gone out of his voice like a light switched off. He turned back to me, deliberately putting his shoulder to my son. "Annette, I'd like Katie to meet you again. May I have your number?" "Your real one this time." Behind him, Sloan had gone white. Across the room, Grant's colleague Preston was watching everything, missing nothing. Grant got me alone by the coat check 20 minutes later. He was sweating through the new jacket. "What was that?" he hissed. You set me up. You came here to embarrass me in front of Vance, in front of everyone." "I came here, Grant, because I was invited," I said quietly. "They're giving me an award. I didn't crash your party. I went where I was actually wanted. I let the difference land." "You should try it sometime. Do you have any idea what you just cost me?" His voice cracked. He was going to sign. That was my whole. "I didn't cost you anything," I said. You did that yourself 3 weeks ago when you decided which side of a velvet rope your mother belonged on. Elliot Vance didn't walk away from you because of me. He walked away because of what he learned about you. Those aren't the same thing." He had no answer, so he reached one last time for management. "Look, we can fix this. You can talk to him. Tell him it was a misunderstanding that we're close. That Grant I opened my purse. I took out the blue folder and I held it unopened where he could see it. I didn't wave it. I just held it the way you hold a chart at the foot of a bed. Do you remember what this is?" His eyes went to it, and I watched 2 years of convenient forgetting collapse in a second. "The 60,000, he said faintly. "The 60,000, I agreed. It was always real. It's been real this whole time. Sitting in a drawer next to your father's death certificate while you told people you were self-made from nothing. I put it back in my purse. I'm not going to make a scene about it. I never was. I just need you to know that I know and that I always did." That was when my son finally stopped performing. "Mom," he said, and his voice came apart, all the polish gone out of it. "I didn't. I never meant for it to." He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. This grown man in his expensive jacket. When did I become like this? How did I get here? It was the first true thing he'd said to me in years, and it broke my heart even as I held my ground, because that's the thing nobody tells you about boundaries. You can keep one and grieve at the same time. Your hands can be steady while your chest caves in. You got here one small choice at a time, I said gently. The same way anybody gets anywhere bad, and you can walk back out of it the same way if you want to. One small choice at a time. I put my hand on his cheek the way I had when he was 5, and certain a Band-Aid could fix anyone. "I am always going to be your mother," I said. "I will love you until the day my heart finally quits for good, but I am done being your secret. I'm not your dirty little down payment. I'm not your bridge loan. I'm not the nurse you keep off the guest list, so your story stays clean." I held his eyes. "If you want me in your life, you want all of me. The scrubs and the pin and the 60,000 and the truth. Or you want none of me, but you don't get the edited version anymore. That woman just retired too. Here's how it actually went in the weeks after. Because I know you want the real ledger and not just the feeling. Elliot Vance did not sign with my son. He moved his accounts to a different advisor at a different firm. Quietly. No drama. But everyone in that small world understood why Grant did not make partner that quarter. The deal that was going to prove he was self-made evaporated for the simplest reason in the world. The most important client of his life found out who his mother was and how he treated her. Katie Vance called me herself a week later. She's 30 now, a pediatric surgeon exactly as her father said. We had coffee. She brought her little girl. I gave the child the crayon drawing back the nurse with the sun over her head, and Katie cried. And I held them both, and it was worth more than any plaque. The 60,000 Grant repaid, all of it with the interest the note specified within the quarter. I think because for the first time, he understood that the paper had always been real and that the realest things in his life were the ones he'd been pretending didn't count. He didn't have the cash easily. He sold the watch. I heard I didn't ask. And the velvet rope life, the glass house, the curated everything got quieter. A slow quarter became a hard year. Sloane's prints came off some walls. I won't pretend I enjoyed that part. I'd have given my son the moon. I just wasn't going to keep handing it to him while he denied I'd ever been in the sky. Grant came to my house about a month later alone. He sat on my porch next to the peace lily, which was by then a small white explosion, and he held his coffee and didn't drink it for a long time. "I figured it out," he said finally. "Why I did it, the guest list, all of it." He stared at the lily. "I wasn't ashamed of you, Mom." I told myself I was, but that wasn't it. He swallowed. "I was ashamed of where I came from, and you were the proof of it. So I kept putting you in the back of the picture because every time I looked at you, I remembered I wasn't born into the rooms I wanted. I made you small so I could feel big." He finally looked at me. "That's the worst thing I've ever done, and I did it to the person who did the most for me. I let him sit in it. Some truths need air, not rescue." "Thank you for saying that," I told him. "It's the bravest thing you've said in 20 years. Is there a way back?" "There's always a way back," I said. "But it runs through the truth, not around it. I'm your mother, Grant. I'm not your reference. I'm not your bank, and I'm not a secret. You bring all of me or you bring none. That's the only guest list I keep now. He nodded and he came back the next week, and the week after that, slowly, one small choice at a time. It's been a year now. Grant is different. Not transformed. People don't transform, but corrected. The way a heart rhythm corrects when you finally treat the real problem instead of the symptom. He asks about my life now. He listens to the answers. Last month, he introduced me to a new client unprompted as my mother, Annette. 41 years in the ICU, the most professional person I know. I had to look at the floor for a second. The plaque hangs in my hallway. The crayon drawing lives in a frame beside it, the nurse and her son. And the peace lily. The one that was never good enough for his stone mantle sits on my porch rail, blooming like it has something to prove. Cleaning the air of every morning I'm lucky enough to get. If there's one thing I'd hand you from all of this, it's this. The people who love you for your title will leave when the title does. But the ones who love you for your character were never counting your guests. Don't ever let someone shrink you to fit their story. Wear your pin, take the thank you, and keep your own records. That's my story. One guest list, one enamel pin, and a plant that bloomed once it was set free. If it reminded you of someone who shows up and asks for nothing, tell them tonight. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.